This video is sponsored by me. Read my original novel, Dance of Frozen Death. Link in the description. Greetings, fellow mortals. One of the single most disappointing things to happen to me this year, at least so far, came in the form of a tweet. Now, this might sound weird. There are a lot more important things in life than Twitter. This isn't like war or famine. I mean, this was personally bad as a reader, as a writer, as a movie watcher, and as a person who loves storytelling.
Roll credits.
I saw perhaps the stupidest take that I could ever expect from the man, the myth, the legend, Stephen King. World building is a phrase I really wish would be retired. Not only is it sloppy and lazy, it has become trite. Now, this is bad on a wide range of reasons. One, Stephen King is an author, a very famous and successful one, perhaps the most famous writer to ever live and never write one single good ending to a story. And yes, I do feel a little worked up by this. Normally, I try not to put on a false sense of outrage. We're talking about fake things here. I would prefer to save real outrage about the injustices spread across the world. But this, well, it really pisses me off. This nihilistic, uncaring, postmodern BS that has influenced even people who should be leading the way for future generations of authors, creators, and writers. Now, I try not to be too harsh to people who don't really deserve it. Putting your content into the world can be terrifying, but that's why I hold people to different standards. If someone is a new YouTuber with 10 subs, you don't expect them to have the budget and experience of someone like Markiplier. If someone is an indie author, you don't expect them to put out the best books ever constructed. Same thing with indie comics, webtoons, manga, and other forms of art. If someone is newer, you should be kind to them for simply trying.
I'm really proud of you.
At least that's how I look at it. Every criticism I have in my videos is not to put down someone who I think is trying their best. It's to point out when creators are being lazy. Because if the artist doesn't care, the audience sure as hell won't. And I think that what Stephen King is saying there is damaging to writers. New authors and creators look to him for guidance. Him dismissing world building could very well cripple someone's ability to make a story. Now, the definition of world building is pretty simple. It's a process of creating an imaginary world that feels real and lived in, even though it isn't. That means the rules have to be consistent. That means everything has to make sense. That means the layout of the land has to connect. That means the decisions people make need to be consistent to how someone in this situation would think. What's a good example of this? Well, what has the best world building ever? Well, that would be Lord of the Rings.
Precious!
I've been rereading the trilogy, and you know what Tolkien has done better than anyone else? He has beautiful prose and has the most consistent world building ever created. Everything about Middle-earth is thought out. Tolkien knew his creation better than he probably knew the real world. He thought and stewed on it, and he shared his astonishing creation to the world. Not to say that his books are perfect. Talk about a slow pace where characters will literally stop and have a snack for no reason, but that's actually a little funny. Tolkien's sincerity and the fact that he was the first out of all of us makes me appreciate his works even more. If he was still around today, he would be encouraging us to immerse ourselves into the world of fiction. Yet the work he has done to pave the way for new creators is getting tossed aside. Just look at the mess which was Rings of Power. At what point did the showrunners look at Tolkien's work and respect the world that he created? And I'm just talking about the rules of Middle-earth as a whole. A dumb, barely canon game like Shadow of Mordor did a better job than the show with the $1 million budget. And let's not just stick to Western media. Instead, let's move on to one of the few fantasy worlds that I think could actually rival Tolkien's work, Eiichiro Oda's world of One Piece. Now, you might not like his character designs, and Oda's ability to do character development isn't exactly the best, but there are a few things that you can never take away from him. His world building, his consistent rules, and his lack of errors in a series that's turning 30 years old soon are all unmatched. If you've experienced anything about One Piece, you know that Oda cares about his world more than anything else. Every design of every island is stunning and full of life. You can tell that Oda literally puts his blood, sweat, and tears into every single location he creates. Not only that, he has thought out the abilities and rules of his creation to the point that there are still logical twists happening as the manga continues to run. It's one of the most inspiring pieces of writing that I have ever seen.
Oh, beautiful.
And there are even more examples of fictional worlds so well thought out that it makes me emotional just thinking about it. Last year I read through Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive series. My God, look at these monsters. And people give One Piece a hard time for having too much content. And this crazy Sanderson is planning to make 10 of these beasts. Or we could look at something like Berserk, which I'm trying to get back into now that it's continuing. Kentaro Miura worked himself sick for this world and these characters. It's possibly the darkest piece of fiction that I've ever experienced that actually has spots of hope dotted throughout it. If the world wasn't so bleak and oppressive, would the story of Guts even work? And there are so many examples of this. Harry Potter, Chainsaw Man, Dune, Game of Thrones, the entirety of the MCU. People care about these worlds just as much as the characters, sometimes even more than the characters. It's not just a fluke, it's these creators taking the time to flush out their worlds. And I think that it's pretty upsetting that such important and stunning work would ever be demeaned like this.
You know what really grinds my gears? Nobody's come up with a new priest and a rabbi joke in like 30 years.
Not to say that world building can't be bad. Under Stephen King's tweet, I saw someone comment that he hates when world building gets in the way of the story. Fine, if an author stops for 3 chapters or 10 minutes or whatever for the medium they're involved in to explain every significant detail of the area, then yes, that's not great. But world building isn't that. If I can bring my own writing and Alpecia universe into this, I work extremely hard to sprinkle exposition and world building as the plot progresses and as the characters develop. I mention every major nation in the 9 Kingdoms of 10 within the first written in stone book. Above Heaven, I foreshadow information by having characters casually drop knowledge in their dialogue, and it feels insulting that someone who I look up to would diminish my efforts like that. It feels far more dismissive and hurtful than all the YouTube critics in the world. World building is a trite term, my ass. World building is setting. Setting, plot, and characters are the 3 most important aspects of storytelling. If you don't have all of them working together, the entire process falls apart.
No, 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 no!
Now, each author and creator has different strengths. Some people might struggle more with world building. I'm not saying they can't create amazing art, but dismissing world building is like dismissing the need for interesting characters or for the story's actual plot. When you take out a core ingredient, the cake doesn't rise. So maybe I am misinterpreting what Stephen King is trying to say here, but his social media game has sucked this year and I don't know what's going on in his head. Maybe he should focus more on helping newer writers than making excuses for why so many major films and shows are failing. And maybe he should have some perspective considering how popular his Dark Tower series is. Yep, no important world building to be seen in there, huh? But what do you think? Am I completely off base here? What's your favorite fictional world? How important is world building to you? Please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your perspectives. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, please remember that I just released my original novel, Dance of Frozen Death, Book 1 in the Written in Stone series. Link in the description. My second book, Above Heaven, will be released in May 2023. I hope that you will check them both out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.